Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by an actual real world superhero. U.S. Representative Luz Rivas. She is representing California's 29th congressional district and the entire country. Hello. Thank you for lifting women, moms, people, parents everywhere, not just in California. And thank you for all that you do. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
There is a lot of bad news, weird news, strange news, unbelievable news, you name it news coming out of Washington, D.C. And you are there with your superhero cape on, fighting for all of us and fighting for democracy. Now, a lot of people we're hearing are very worried about things like the SAVE Act, which would make it nearly impossible to vote if you have a different name on your birth certificate than on your current driver's license, for example, which, the majority of married women in America do have. What should we be most worried about, and what should we do to stop it?
Yeah, great questions. I've heard from a lot of constituents, especially women, that are very concerned about the SAVE Act and how Republicans are trying to push this through Congress. I voted against this bill because it puts up barriers to voting. We want more people to vote, not less. And Trump continues to pressure Republicans to vote on this bill. And the barriers that they're putting up will block women and working Americans from participating in our elections. Like, for example, if your name is different from your birth certificate, the SAVE Act will make it harder for you to vote, which means if you got married or you changed your last name, it'll be harder for you to register to vote. If you don't have an updated passport, the SAVE Act will also make it harder to vote, which means if you need to renew the passport, you need to pay to get a passport, which costs over $100. Not everyone needs a passport. I have constituents, senior citizens that don't travel. They don't want a passport and have to pay a fee in order to vote. Also, many people can't physically go to a voting booth. And the SAVE Act will also make it harder for you to vote. So this bill is a distraction that Republicans have put up. Instead of focusing on making life more affordable for constituents, they put this up because they want to put up more barriers for everyday Americans to vote. But what I encourage people to do is to share their stories on how their harmful actions will impact, especially to their representatives, because there are Republicans across the country that are also getting the pressure from their constituents, because this doesn't just affect blue states or blue districts. It's everywhere. Women across the country especially would be affected. So they need to hear from the people about how these actions are directly impacting them.
And that is so important. And I just want to double down on one of the things that you said, which is that our elections already include, you all, multiple layers of security. It is already illegal for non-citizens to vote under federal law. And the multiple layers of security include everything from registration verification to signature matching to ballot tracking and to post-election audits. And through all of this analysis, studies of U.S. elections have consistently found that voter fraud is extremely rare and basically doesn't happen. It's estimated at 0.0025% of all ballots, but like nothing. That's minuscule. And then it turns out that the small number of cases that do occur are often paperwork. And so this is not a law that's needed, as you just heard. This instead, I think, and many others think, is a way to cheat, to suppress the vote, because honestly, Donald Trump and Republican leadership's policies of cutting healthcare, cutting childcare, increasing costs are not popular. What they are doing is not popular. Their polls are tanking. So instead of trying to make policies that reflect and respect their Democratic and Republican constituents, they're trying to cheat to win elections. I'm laughing, but you can either laugh or cry because I cannot even with this. And so I just wanted to add that to what you said. I wanted to double down, triple down on what you said, because of course you're exactly right. And then I heard you say something else that I have a follow-up question on, which is, I heard you say, call your members of Congress. I get questions all the time. Doesn't matter when people call. Doesn't matter when people share a story. Doesn't matter when people write. Do people's voices make a difference?
As a member of Congress, I can assure you that your voice does matter. My team tracks every call, every letter we get. I get a weekly summary of who has called, what issues they have called in. And sometimes, we get 1,000 calls about one issue, and it alerts me, oh, my constituents really care about this issue. If there's a vote coming up, we take that into consideration. So for me, it's a daily process that my team is receiving the calls, tracking them, and then summarizing them for me. And I think most members of Congress do the same thing. They read and hear from constituents, either through their teams or when they're at events, through town halls, lots of different ways that we hear what our own constituents are thinking. So I think it is very important. It may not feel when you make a call that, are we listening? But I can assure you that we are, as members of Congress.
And that's important. You also keep those calls going. Don't give up. Don't give up on democracy. Don't give up on any of the policies that you care about. And that brings us to healthcare. Every single person gets sick, and every single person should have the opportunity to get better. But in the big, terrible, awful bill of doom, also known by Donald Trump as the big, beautiful bill, yuck, it's not beautiful at all. Over $100 million was cut out of healthcare, and Donald Trump has been standing in the way of the tax credit extension for the Affordable Care Act, which is going to cause healthcare costs to raise 70 to 90% in rural areas for people across the country, tens of millions of people. And these healthcare cuts, you all, are rolling, meaning that they're happening into the future, meaning that we haven't even seen the biggest impact of the cost increases, the lack of affordability of healthcare that Donald Trump and Republican leadership are causing just yet. What can people do to help reverse the cuts and get access to actual affordable healthcare, given that we have this, I'm going to call it malignant Cheeto situation?
So great. I've heard from many constituents on how these cuts are directly affecting them. They're losing healthcare, or they're having to choose between paying the rent or paying for healthcare. And there's people that have chronic conditions that really need an affordable health plan. And so it's affecting not just those people, but those of us that have insurance from our employer. Our rates are going to go up because hospitals are going to have to pay more for our care too. And so it's impacting, like you said, it's slowly rolling out, but we're all going to see that impact. And again, Democrats in the House, we voted to restore the tax credits. In my district, 31,000 families could see increases. And I hear from a lot of them. They call my office, and I continue to fight to make sure that they are getting those Affordable Care Act tax credits, which, like I said, in the House, the Democrats did vote that bill out with a few Republicans joining us. So that means
17. Not that I'm counting.
Yeah. So they heard from their constituents, right? It's like, it impacts everyone. It doesn't matter what party you're registered. Healthcare should be affordable. And that's what we believe. And we continue to fight to make sure that happens.
Yeah. And thank you for that. I mean, I feel like everybody should give you a giant standing ovation across the country. Thank you for fighting for our healthcare, for our families, for affordability. And when we're talking about affordability, there's another area. There's so many areas. Sometimes people are like, Kristen, you have issues. I'm like, yes, I have issues. But they're all linked together, these issues. And one of the things that ties them together is affordability. And under Donald Trump and Republican leadership sort of reign, we've seen costs go up all over the place. And one of the areas that we've seen costs go up is childcare. Now, let us have a moment. Just like we need to build bridges and roads to drive on to get to work, we need childcare so parents can go to work, so kids can thrive, so businesses don't have supply chain or employee disruptions, and so our economy does well. In fact, study after study of the return on investment of childcare finds that for every $1 taxpayers put in, we actually get back later between $7 and $28 back, because childcare is really, really important to the running of America. Just recently, we saw Donald Trump on national television saying that America doesn't need childcare. I'm like, what planet are you living on? I mean, we kind of already knew he wasn't living on my planet, but on my planet, 3/4 of moms are in the labor force in much needed jobs, and those families need the wages of moms to make ends meet. So where do the children go? We need high quality, affordable childcare and early learning for kids. So I know that you and the Democratic Party and the Democratic Women's Caucus have been standing up time and time again. And in fact, listeners, I just want to share with you, there have been fights to maintain childcare funding that have been won that nobody thought could be won, thanks to leaders in the Democratic Party. And so what is your take on the current childcare situation in America, which is hugely costful? I made up a word, costful, costs more than college. But what's happening?
Yeah, right now, as you saw, Trump says there's no money for childcare because we're fighting a war that is costing U.S. taxpayers $1 billion a day. So they can find $1 billion a day to get into this war in Iran, but not to help out working families with childcare so that they can go to work. I hear from constituents all the time about this, on how it's so unaffordable. It costs less to send your kid to college than to pay for a year of childcare in some states. That shouldn't be the case. And we've seen, like the mayor of New York has made it a priority. I have visited Boston when I was in the state legislature that has made childcare for all part of their plan. Local governments are finding that they need to step up too, but it should be a federal priority. And I work, many of my Democratic colleagues that have been there for years have fought for childcare to make it more affordable. It shouldn't be this expensive, and it's a value. It should be our priority. And that's why I'm in Congress, to help working families with these high costs.
Yes, thank you. Again, I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you. Sometimes people look at Congress and they're like, they don't represent us. I'm like, which specific people don't represent us? Because we have some superheroes. And I'm so glad that we're joined by you, a true superhero today. And speaking of superhero, how do you keep going? We only have about a minute and a half left. How do you keep going as a superhero when there's, just so much terrible news?
Yeah, it's challenging, to be a new member of Congress with this chaos and evil actions that this administration does every day. But I come home. Right now, I'm in my district in Los Angeles, and I get motivated by the people that I'm fighting for a better life, for more affordable costs, more affordable healthcare, rent. They keep me going, and it gives me the energy to go back to Washington and continue fighting along with my House Democratic colleagues.
Thank you again so much. So, people, one of the other things we need you to do is to check that your voter registration is up to date. Do it now. Do it in a month. Maybe do it monthly. I'm thinking you might need to do it monthly. There are some shenanigans going on, brought to you by Donald Trump and some Republican leaders. So we want to make sure that you check that you're registered to vote. I'm going to say it monthly. I just decided right now. Monthly. Check your voter registration. And then vote leaders who respect and reflect you and your values. And one thing that's happening right now is we know that Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians all over the country support things like access to high quality childcare, access to health care, affordability. But we know that Republican leaders in Congress are out of step with their own constituents. They are not doing what their own constituents want them to do. That means we need to switch who's in office, you all. And when you switch who's in office, changes happen. We have a long history of positive, proactive policies that allows people to thrive and have opportunity that fortunately have been brought to you by champions like Representative Rivas, who we have on today. So make sure you're registered to vote and vote for candidates who do what you want them to do. Thank you for being on. Thank you for showing us what leadership can look like in a positive way.
Thank you so much. And thank you for getting this message out.
Thank you.